Hi, and welcome to Alta Asks Live. My name is Beth Spotswood. I am Alta's digital editor. I am so excited to be here today with our regular host and Alta contributor, Heather Scott Partington. Today, she's going to be in conversation with a Renaissance man, Ishmael Reed, a longtime Oakland resident, a playwright, an author, a poet, an educator, an activist, a jazz pianist, I just found out, who was you all just missed a great story about Naomi Campbell, so you'll have to tune in another time for that one. But Heather and Ishmael are going to talk about basically whatever Ishmael wants, but namely, he's got a new book out. He's written not only poetry but 2 essays about the transitions of his Oakland neighborhood. And then we're going to open it up to questions. Ishmael, if you want, may read a little bit, then we'll open it up to questions. So please do ask a question. I will be trying to give you guys links and kind of stay in touch, but otherwise I'm going to stop talking, let Heather and Ishmael take over, and I'll be back. Take over, guys.
Thank you, Beth. Ishmael, welcome.
Oh, thank you.
I'm so glad that you could join us for Alta Asks Live. How are you? How is life in Oakland right now?
Well, we have a workman on the street here because being gentrified, and it's like living in a warehouse district, and the workers not wearing their masks. So that's what's going on here.
Yeah. I want to talk about your 2 essays that have appeared in Alta. My Neighborhood Part 1, which was written originally for California Magazine in the 80s, and My Neighborhood Part 2. There's a lot of change that's happened in your Oakland neighborhood, and you write about that. But I was wondering if you could just start off by telling us what drew you to your particular house in Oakland when you moved there originally.
Well, we've been renting. We lived in Berkeley, and we lived in El Cerrito. And this house was available. It was in it was in a condition where it might be condemned.
Mm-hmm.
Matter of fact, it was raining in the living room, and there were pigeons there. So we restored it. It's a Queen Anne that was built in 1906, and so we've pretty original form.
How has the neighborhood changed in the 36 years between the 2 essays?
Well, this was a Black neighborhood when we moved in in 1979. And I think that the residents are pretty suspicious of our, we had sort of like an upper bohemian style. This is a very traditional Black neighborhood. But I ended up doing all the eulogies. So,
Wow.
We gained their confidence. Carla, who's not Black, was really looked after some of the neighbors here. So we had a lot of stories, a lot of good stories. And outside the essays that I wrote about the neighborhood, I wrote a play called Hubba City that was that was performed at a Black Repertory Theater. And it performed in New York at the Neoamerican Poets Cafe, and got a great review from Cleve Barnes, the late Cleve Barnes, critic. And also got a song called Oakland Blues about the death of a neighbor in the neighborhood. So I was able to get a lot of material just observing what was going on here. Now the big change happened. They made a deal with the Contras to put crack into the neighborhoods. And I think that's what's happening in Chicago too. Excuse me. The corporate media will talk about, homicides in these cities like Chicago and New York and Oakland, but they don't connect it to the marketing of drugs. That these are rival gangs, drug gangs, fighting over turfs. So I noticed that when the crack came into our neighborhoods, the homicide rate went up. If you look at the homicide rates, black on black crime, they had plunged, and then it's like a V, and then all of a sudden there's a rise connecting with the marketing of crack. So we had 2 crack houses on the street, and if you look at Alta magazine, my daughter Tennessee and I were responsible for getting one torn down. I don't know, kind of miss it. I mean, it kind of opened up the neighborhood for gentrification, those kind of things. And so, that was the downside. And so I saw that happen. In Chicago, for example, I didn't see this in the corporate media, but on Al Jazeera, they did a story about Mexican officials from Mexico coming to Chicago and talking about the drug trade. So when Trump and others talk about homicide in Chicago or Detroit or other places, they never connected to marketing. We go meet with the police. We met with the police. I mean, they take my jokes. I don't want to tell you some of them, but they said, and matter of fact, I said, well, why don't you bring one of these white suburban kids who can shoot a target at 1,000 feet? Bring them in, teach these guys how to shoot, because they shoot up on the whole neighborhood. They miss the target. But anyway, I mean, that's what I'm in a dark humor, So I think that was a significant change. It sort of like disrupted the neighborhood.
Yeah.
And there's certain things we couldn't do. A whole case of liberties that we couldn't because of the presence of arms and guns on the street. So the neighborhood, and that's happening in the country. Drug wars.
So you talked about gentrification a little bit, and I know from reading the second essay that that's something that's definitely happening around you and around your house. What challenges does your neighborhood face moving forward and encountering people who come in to gentrify the neighborhood?
I think they're nocturnal. I never see them. I mean, there are people who moved to this neighborhood. I've never seen them. I don't know what that's all about. I mean, maybe they're having secret meetings or they belong to a secret society, but this was a family neighborhood. We all knew each other. We all knew each other on the block. And there are people who were scouts who looked out for trouble. Some of those people are still here. But the white neighborhoods, the white neighbors don't seem to want to interact with the remaining black families on the block.
You spoke about speaking at funerals, delivering eulogies. I know you write in the essays also about some of your other roles in the neighborhood. Can you just talk about historically what it's been like for you to interact with those neighbors when it was more of a family neighborhood?
Well, there was a culture of blacks called maroons. These were blacks who were removed from, say, the colonial administration or downtown, and they had this tradition of kings. So like Queen Ida, the blues singer, is part of this tradition. So I nominated myself king of the neighborhood, lowercase k, and I would negotiate with downtown. I would nudge downtown about taking care of problems, and it was very difficult, though. It's very difficult. One of the ironic things is that we had two gangs who would exchange fire on the block. There was one at the end of the block and one in the middle of the block, and they would exchange gunfire. And I would have to call in Tennessee to continue shopping because the coast wasn't clear. Ironically, it was a ex-felon from Pelican State Penitentiary who gave rid of the gangs. he did something to the police. He was one of the last gang members to leave the block. He sold his house for, I think it was $160,000. Somebody brought a crew in, a labor crew, and they resold it for like up to $600,000.
Wow.
So gentrification has increased the property value. but at the same time, it's not the kind of a community that we had before.
Yeah. Yeah. What do you wish people knew about Oakland?
Well, one of the reasons I like Oakland is because originally, because it reminded me of the eastern towns. Like I grew up in Buffalo, New York, which was an industrial town. And, we had a migration from the South to Black people who worked on the docks and worked for Kaiser corporations. And we had the same kind of thing in Buffalo. So it reminded me, I think of all the California towns I'm aware of, Oakland is one that reminded me most of an eastern town, like Buffalo, New York, Detroit, Chicago, those towns. So that's one of the charms of Oakland. A book with Rick Nagler, the photographer. And we were able to, he was able to take a lot of photos, and I wrote the captions about how a disappearing Oakland. We took pictures of old Oakland before the renovation, which I like, incidentally. We took pictures of the Hofbräu, for example, all these old Oakland institutions that are disappearing, like Genoa Delicatessen is gone. All these places are gone, and they're being replaced by, other enterprises.
You've had a phenomenal career so far. You've written pretty much every genre that a person can write. In Alta, as I mentioned, you have 2 essays, these My Neighborhood essays. You have poetry recently. You're also on the editorial board for Alta. You've written music, you've performed music, poetry, nonfiction, fiction. What commonalities do you see between all of those different genres that you've worked in creatively? Are there themes that you see across your work and across the years since you've published your first novel?
At California College of the Arts. As a matter of fact, last year I had 2 jobs. I was teaching at Berkeley, and I think poetry is most difficult. And it's the one I recommend to average people. In Japan, they have a form called waka, which everybody writes, cab drivers, royal family. So I think you can see from this, one of the aspects of this virus is that you can look at social media and see that people staying home leads to their being creative. As a matter of fact, the Getty Museum did a project where people were like impersonating different paintings throughout history. And I think talent is widespread. Some people take chances. I had to decide whether I was going to write or, sell beer or something like that. And, so it involves risk.
Yeah.
But I think people have talent. I've shown that by if you go to Google my name and go to news, you'll see some of the writers that I've influenced. For example, most recently, Frank Wilton, who has a book out, it's getting a lot of praise. Latest issue of the New Yorker, he's got a profile in there, or among the last 2, either last week or the week before. And one of the feminist writers is leading a new wave writer in Israel. And she attributes her being encouraged to write by participating in my class. And there was Wajad Ali, who wrote the first Pakistani American plays, Domestic Crusaders. Started in my class. It's become a classic. It's been performed internationally. And it started out at a restaurant in Fremont, where in order to lure an audience, you get a meal, you pay $15, you get a dinner. We didn't think many people were going to show. 400 people showed up.
Wow.
And Carla was, it started my class because he had missed 3 weeks because of 9/11. And when he came back, he thought I was going to dismiss him from the class. I said, no, you drop this class. I'll do an independent with you. Write a play. I told him to read Arthur Miller, Jewish American family, Lorraine Hansberry, Black American family, Eugene O'Neill, the great Long Day's Journey into Night. So he came up with a family play. We got it done at the Berkeley Rep, and then it went to the finally up at the Kennedy Center. And he and Carla worked on that play for 2 years.
Wow. You know, one of the commonalities in everything that you've published and put out into the world is that you have such a bold and a voice that speaks for other people whose voices have been silenced, and you're unafraid of political writing and satirical writing. What advice would you give to students or to writers, people who haven't even taken on writing as a vocation yet, but who want to use this important moment in history that we're in? What advice would you have for them about writing their truth and writing the truth of of people who are underrepresented?
Well, I think my advice to younger writers is to go global. Do you understand?
Yeah.
Because I think if you rely upon an audience in the United States, you have to go along with the trends, and sort of like the judgment of critics who might not understand you. And so I wrote a novel called Reckless Eyeballing, which offended everybody. My editor said it's going to offend everybody, and it did. And I was sort of like left as literary roadkill. I studied Japanese and wrote a novel called Japanese by Spring, and got a tour of Japan. They liked it over there, and now it's a national project in China.
Wow.
That means that the government pays for the study of the novel, and so I've gotten a lot of traction because of that. As a matter of fact, my books are being translated there. Since March, my essays have been published in Liberation in Paris, El País in Spain, Haaretz in Israel. New York Times did a piece. I was shocked, but it's very difficult for me to get my op-eds published in this country. I'm not leading liberals on a safari trip, or so. I'm not life coaching anybody and tell them how to behave.
Yeah.
It's
speaking
like,
of things,
political exercise. Go on.
Oh, I apologize. I was just going to say, speaking of,
I'm not. Go on.
Speaking of things that have been in the news, with the re-release or with the release of Hamilton onto Disney Plus, your play, The Haunting of Lin-Manuel Miranda, has been in the news. Can you just speak a little bit about that and about what the driving force behind the play was for you?
Well, that was really a fluke, because I was supposed to go to Washington National Gallery, which was celebrating a film that we made in 1979, 1980 by the great Bill Gunn. He's become an icon now, great director Bill Gunn. And they had a government shutdown. And so I called my director, with whom I've been working like 3 decades, Rome Neal, and Dan Gallant of the Neoamerican Poets Cafe. I said, I'm writing this thing about the play response to Hamilton, and what do we have a week? Well, we got standing room only, we got all this press, a lot of very negative, really terrible attacks. It's amazing. Wait, don't tell me that showing it. They really ridiculed me. They hadn't even seen the play.
Yeah.
I got a better result on The View, which people at NPR was probably considered lowbrow. I got a better discussion on The View than on NPR. But there were these comments that were really ugly in the New York Times comments page after the review there, and in Broadway World, which is a trade magazine of the theater world in New York. But now people are coming around and deciding that they don't really favor slave traders. So, now that Disney has come out with the film, everywhere that most of the places where they've reviewed, Los Angeles Times, other places, they mentioned my play.
Yeah.
It's like a tugboat. It's like a tugboat colliding with a destroyer. with their $1 billion. So in Germany and China and England, where they reviewed the play, they mentioned my play. Well, it's
Wow.
easy because Hamilton was a slave trader. He owned slaves and he sold them for others. So, period. But what's interesting is that 3 women historians were the ones who were there before we were.
Mm.
And Nancy Eisenberg and Michelle DeRoss. These are 3 women historians who had criticisms of Hamilton, that this is all made up. He was not an abolitionist. He was not, all for manumission or whatever. And my play merely popularized, going to the theater, popularized their criticisms. They had a couple of historians on the, including Annette Gordon Reed. They still quote her. She at least said that he was not an abolitionist. Okay, and I mean, he left receipts. he left receipts.
Yeah.
Tied him with the slave, tied him to the slave trades. For example, in my play, I have a character called Negro Woman because he sold or bought a Negro woman and child for $200. So in my play, The Haunting of Lin-Manuel Miranda, he is not a villain. He is just someone who was, influenced by a curriculum,
right,
in which the so-called founding fathers are gods. They're flawless, but they had flaws, and he's taught or he's instructed indentured servant, Steve, Native Americans. Hamilton's policy of Native Americans were terrible. I found a letter written in 1791 where he celebrated gleefully, as Time magazine said, the raiding by vigilantes of a Native American settlement where he applauded their demolishing, his word, demolish, men, women, children. So they never talked about his attitude toward Native Americans. Their lives don't count. So there's a theater in Berkeley that's interested in bringing it here, so we'll see what happens.
Oh, that'd be great. That would be great. Good for all of us in California to get a chance to see it.
Yeah.
Do you have something that you'd like to read for us today?
I'll have to go get a book. I'm sorry, I forgot about that part. It'll only take a minute. Is that okay?
Yeah, sure, sure. Yeah,
okay.
Absolutely.
That's good.
I will just pop back in to discuss this conversation with you, Heather, while Ishmael runs to grab a book.
Yeah.
One of the questions that perhaps you can ask when Ishmael comes back or finishes reading, I'm just as we go through the queue, is will The Haunting of Lin-Manuel Miranda be performed on the West Coast? Are there plans to, particularly now that it's popped up? And I should dig up, Ishmael was just quoted in the San Francisco Chronicle because now that it's been on Disney Plus and kicked open to a much wider audience, they're asking all the same questions Ishmael asked.
Yeah. It sounds like it's going to be hopefully coming to Berkeley so that people in California will have a chance to see it. I think that would be great. I think it's an important. I was just talking to my daughter who's going into college. She's going to be a freshman, and I asked her last night if she had seen Hamilton, and she said, "Yeah, but I don't like it." And I said, why, and she said, because I'm not into slave traders. I'm not into people who own slaves. And I think that there are a lot of young people who are looking for that counter narrative as well. So Ishmael's work is incredibly important.
Perhaps we'll see The Haunting of Lin-Manuel Miranda on Disney Plus. We can balance it out. All right, I'm going to get lost again.
Okay, I would mention the name of the theater, but we'll wait and see what happens.
Okay.
Yeah. Okay, I have a poem that SF Jazz put up on a wall. So anybody wants to, I've done public poetry. I've been commissioned. My person came from my mother when I was in high school, and she asked me to write a poem for the birthday of one of her fellow employees. That was my first commission.
Yeah.
One of my poems is at the BART station in Richmond. Part of an installment done by Mildred Howard, the sculptor and artist. So when commuters go to the new BART station in Richmond, they see these huge letters that I wrote about Richmond. I was commissioned by the city of Richmond. Then I have a poem on the sidewalk of Center Street. So I have a lot of public stuff out.
That's great.
Which was commissioned by Robert Haas, the poet, former poet laureate.
Yeah.
And it's so anybody wants to see it. Center and Shattuck. It's right there on the sidewalk. And then I had a poem on the bus in New York.
Wow.
On the bus. So I like to. So this poem is this is a poem is in Raise Up Off Me Alley. They put it up. And Raise Up Off Me was a book written by the jazz pianist, San Francisco jazz pianist, named Hampton Hawes, excellent pianist. And he was in Lexington Hospital for narcotics.
Mm.
And they had a great band down there because all these guys in Lexington Hospital. And he saw Kennedy's inauguration. And he said, this is the guy that's going to get me out of here.
Mm.
And Kennedy pardoned him because he said, oh, this guy just wants to play piano. Anyway, this is called
Wow.
When I Die, I Will Go to Jazz. As Ted would say, let them go to heaven or let them go to hell. When I die, I want to go to jazz. Who needs Gabriel when we got Clifford, Clark, Lee, and Bix? You can add Thad to that distinguished mix. And President Billy sit on their thrones, and their court wear pork pies, gardenias, and checkered vests. And the tempo of the place is like Denzel Best, with Mingus and Ray Brown doing the chores on bass. A place where Satch is Avatar, and Sun Ra, Gill, and Count are resident sages. Those are Fats and Hot Lips Page, with Kluk on drums and Train on axe, 1,000 years of jamming. For what more could I ask? Let them go to heaven and let them go to hell. When I die, I want to go to jazz. Don't surround me with cherubim with their golden locks, a place where there's no vodka on the rocks, and spare me the diet of milk and honey in this high up Lincoln Center where it's all about the money. What use are angels singing a cappella when I can have Dinah, Sarah, and a scatting Ella? A tisket, a tasket, I lost my yellow basket. Mr. Paganini, play my melody. I want to spend eternity in a place where they can swing it. No need for paradise where anybody can wing it. The folks in jazz might not dress in white garments, but they're as natty and clean as a stylish Earl Gardner, or Duke in his tails, gloves, and black top hat, and St. Peter is Babs Gonzalez saying, welcome home, cats. The residents of jazz are bopping in the aisles as Diz and Bird swap fours with Miles, and spare me the sounds of celestial harmonics. I prefer something like jazz at the Philharmonic, John Sid in the city. When I die, I will go straight to jazz. No need for me to encounter the Naz, and don't send me off with a lot of razzmatazz. Some bars from around midnight will do just fine, and lacking that, some Earl Father Hines.
Awesome. Thank you so much.
Yeah. There are a lot of illusions.
Yeah. We're gonna have Beth come back, but I just want to thank you so much for your time today, and it's been just phenomenal to talk to you and to read your work. And we're gonna take some questions from our viewers. Beth's gonna pop back on.
I don't know.
Okay,
I was applauding. I was applauding and muted, but I was going nuts over here. Ishmael, I needed to hear that. I needed a pick me up right now. So thank you. That was really beautiful, and wonderful, and magical. I just had a little moment. Thanks.
People are having this poem read at their funerals.
Wow.
I love that.
It makes sense. I can see that. Susan asks, what is the name of the book of photos for which you wrote the captions? Is there a...
It's called Oakland Rhapsody.
One more time, Oakland
Rhapsody.
Oakland Rhapsody.
It's called Oakland Rhapsody. And the photos are by Richard Nagler, who's done photography books about Miami and stuff like that. He's a good photographer.
I will link to it in a second. Can you talk to us a little bit about, I believe it's one of your latest books, if not your latest, Why No Confederate Statues in Mexico? And I realize that we're running out of time here, but I would love your take on the removal of statues that's going on now.
Well, those are terrible people. The image of the Confederate generals in the textbooks is that they were in West Point, and next we see them tearfully and painfully deciding to defend the homeland. No, what's left out is that they killed a lot of people on the way to the Civil War. They killed a lot of Native Americans, and they killed a lot of people in Mexico. They're all down there. Jefferson Davis, Robert E. Lee, and a number of other. Stonewall Jackson was down there. I have on the cover 7 children, Mexican children. There was a battle that was organized by Robert E. Lee, who was an engineer. The Mexican general surrendered, but these kids who were from age of 13 to 19 refused to surrender to Robert E. Lee and the other Confederates, and they were murdered. And one of them jumped off the balcony of the building holding the Mexican flag. And they're called Los Ninos, and they are memorialized in Mexico. Number 2, a contingent of Irish Americans and some blacks, some fugitive slaves, formed a group called the St. Patrick's Battalion. There were such atrocities committed in Mexico by the invading army that they defected to the other side and were hanged. And so they also memorialized in Mexico. So what I wanted to say was, these guys were killers before they began that war that cost 600,000 lives. Now, one more little anecdote. 2 slaves escaped from Robert E. Lee's plantation, Arlington, and he brought them back. There was a woman and her brother. He ordered them to be whipped, 20 lashes to the woman, 50 lashes to her brother. And the overseer had compassion. He wouldn't do it. So he brought somebody in, and Robert E. Lee urged them or commanded that they lay these whips on hard. And then after they were whipped, he put brine in their wounds. So, I mean, anybody, I think, who wants a statue of that guy is probably sick as he was. He belongs in Edgar Allan Poe's short story. Pit of opinion. So, I mean, there are a lot of things there are gaps in American history. Yeah. And I see myself as like exploring the rubbish and bringing it to the surface.
You do it somehow beautifully.
That's why there are no reviews of the book in this country.
Yeah. Wow. Well,
Montreal.
I've shared a link to it right over here, so
great.
You check it out. If you can actually explore on Bookshop, to our audience, you can explore all of Ishmael's published work that's currently for sale. If you click on this green button below, it'll take you to Bookshop, which is an independent bookseller and supports independent booksellers.
Well, you know, it's interesting. I wrote a book called Flight to Canada, and I never knew I'd be going to Canada to get my books published and traveling to Canada. And this is part of a tradition. In 1836, the fugitive slaves who lived in Canada organized an anthology, and they could say in Canada what they couldn't say down here.
Wow. You're, Heather, thank you. Ishmael, thank you so much for sharing your knowledge and wisdom, and especially that poem today.
I'll read it better next time.
We'll do it again. Anyone who missed it, I will have this up on Alta Online later today, forever. Oh,
New and collected poems.
I'll link to that too.
I got it upside down. You got
it right.
No, you're good.
Is it that side? Is that right?
Yeah, you're right. Yeah.
Okay. There it is. It's available at Amazon. This book.
All right. Well, okay.
And my new book of poetry will be out in September.
Oh, great. And we will, as soon as that's available, we'll push it out on Alta as well. And your daughter, Tennessee, who is also an Alta poet, has a new book coming out when?
Yeah, they say she's a better poet than me.
When's her book coming out?
She's got a book called, she's got a book called Califia Burning.
Oh, California.
California Burning, Califia.
Yeah.
California's named for the Amazon queen.
Yeah.
And she go around the world bringing sperm donors back here. You know, she got the griffin in the seal, on the state seal, you know, the tiger. She's the Amazon queen. And according to Gaelic and Spanish legends, she's black.
Oh, wow. Well, we will look for that. We'll promote all of those, of course, on Alta's social channels. Ishmael, thank you so much. Folks, tune in next week for poet Sarah Borjas will join us Wednesday, the 29th at 12:30 right here on Crowdcast. Heather and Ishmael, again, thank you so much. Thanks to everyone for joining us as well. Take care.
Thank you.
Thank you.